If you were arriving in Barcelona on a cruise today and asked me how I would spend a few hours exploring the city on foot, this is exactly the route I would recommend. Together, we'll walk from the cruise port into the heart of Barcelona, passing some of the city's most famous landmarks along the way. We'll visit the Columbus Monument, stroll down Las Ramblas, see the historic Liceu Opera House, walk along Passeig de Gràcia to La Pedrera, explore the Gothic Quarter, visit Barcelona Cathedral, Plaça Sant Jaume, the Palau de la Música, and much more. But this isn't just a walking tour. As we go, I'll share local history, interesting stories, practical tips, and a few recommendations that most visitors never hear about. We begin here at Barcelona's World Trade Center, a place that will be familiar to many cruise passengers. This is where the cruise shuttle bus drops off and picks up visitors traveling between the cruise terminals and the city center. For many years, this area played a much larger role in Barcelona's cruise industry. Several cruise ships used to dock right here, next to the World Trade Center. Today, only the South Terminal remains, and it sees very little cruise traffic compared with Barcelona's modern terminals further along the waterfront. The former terminal areas have gradually been opened to the public and transformed into spaces where locals come to walk, run, cycle, or simply enjoy the views of the harbor and the Mediterranean Sea. From here, we'll make our way into the historic center of Barcelona, following a route that combines world-famous landmarks with places that many visitors walk past without ever realizing their significance. So, let's get started. This building is Barcelona's former customs house, built in the late 19th century. For many years, all goods arriving through the port had to pass through here for inspection and customs duties. Today it serves as a government office, but it remains a reminder of the vital role the port played in Barcelona's growth and prosperity. On our left, you'll see the impressive royal shipyards of Barcelona, known locally as the Drassanes Reels. Parts of this complex date back to the 13th century, making it one of the best-preserved medieval shipyards anywhere in the world. During the Middle Ages, Barcelona was one of the most important ports in the Mediterranean. These shipyards built and maintained the galleys that connected Catalonia and other Mediterranean territories with ports across Europe, North Africa, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Hundreds of craftsmen worked here building vessels that carried merchants, soldiers, and travelers across the sea. Today, the complex houses Barcelona's Maritime Museum, one of the city's most interesting museums for anyone interested in ships, navigation, and maritime history. If you look behind the shipyards, you'll also find one of the surviving sections of Barcelona's old city walls. For centuries, these fortifications protected the city from attacks arriving both by land and by sea. Standing here, it's hard to imagine that the shoreline used to be much closer. Over the centuries, Barcelona expanded its port and reclaimed land from the sea, dramatically changing the appearance of this area. Long before modern cruise ships arrived in Barcelona, this was one of the places where the city's maritime history was being written. Rising above the roundabout ahead of us is one of Barcelona's most recognizable landmarks, the Columbus Monument. The monument was inaugurated in 1888 for Barcelona's Universal Exposition and stands around 60 meters, or nearly 200 feet, tall. At the top is a statue of Christopher Columbus pointing out toward the sea. Many visitors are surprised to learn that Columbus is not actually pointing toward the Americas. If you look carefully at the direction of his finger, he is pointing roughly toward the entrance of the port and the area now occupied by the Mall d'Ossat, where most of Barcelona's modern cruise terminals are located. Over the years, many explanations have been suggested. Some people believe it was an artistic choice, while others see it as a symbolic statement. Whatever the reason, the direction of the statue has sparked debate ever since the monument was built. Columbus himself remains one of the most fascinating and controversial figures in history. Even his origins are still debated today. The most widely accepted theory is that he was born in Genoa, but other researchers have suggested possible links to Catalonia, Portugal, and several other regions. His voyage across the Atlantic in 1492 changed the course of world history. However, historians today generally agree that Columbus was not the first person to reach the American continent. Indigenous peoples had lived there for thousands of years, and Norse explorers are believed to have reached parts of North America centuries before Columbus made his famous journey. Some researchers have also suggested that Columbus may have possessed maps, knowledge, or information indicating that lands existed beyond the Atlantic Ocean before he set sail. While these theories remain the subject of debate, they continue to attract interest from historians and researchers around the world. More than 500 years later, Columbus remains a figure surrounded by mystery, controversy, and unanswered questions. From here, we leave the waterfront behind and enter one of the most famous streets in Barcelona and arguably one of the most famous promenades in Europe. Welcome to La Rambla. For many visitors, this is where their first real encounter with Barcelona begins. Stretching from the Columbus Monument all the way to Plaça Catalunya, La Rambla has been the city's main promenade for centuries and remains one of the most visited places in Catalonia. This building houses Barcelona's Wax Museum, located inside a former bank dating back to the 19th century. Attached to the museum is El Bosc de la Fada, or the Forest of the Fairies, a bar designed to resemble an enchanted forest, complete with trees, caves, and atmospheric lighting. Together, they form one of the most distinctive corners at the lower end of La Rambla. As you can see, La Rambla is currently undergoing a major renovation project. The works aim to create more space for pedestrians, improve accessibility, upgrade underground utilities, and make this iconic boulevard more comfortable and sustainable for both residents and visitors. The project is being carried out in phases to keep La Rambla open throughout the construction period, with completion expected over the coming years. As we continue along La Rambla, you'll notice plenty of restaurants, cafes, and souvenir shops catering to visitors. Some are perfectly fine, but as a general rule, I wouldn't recommend stopping at the first place you see. In my experience, some of Barcelona's best food, most authentic atmosphere, and best value shopping can often be found just a few streets away from the main tourist routes. As we walk through the city, I'll point out a few places that I think are worth stepping off the beaten path for. One thing to keep in mind when visiting Barcelona is pickpocketing. Like many major tourist destinations around the world, busy areas can attract thieves looking for distracted visitors. Keep your belongings secure at all times, especially in crowded places, and be cautious if someone tries to distract you with the unexpected questions, petitions, games, or offers of help. As a general rule, if someone approaches you on the street without a clear reason and seems determined to get your attention, it's worth being a little cautious. Most Catalans are friendly and helpful when asked, but we don't usually stop strangers in the street for a chat, so trust your instincts if something doesn't feel right. If you need emergency assistance, call 112, the European emergency number, and if you do become the victim of a theft, always report it to the police. Unfortunately, many tourists don't take the time to file a report, which makes it harder for repeat offenders to face consequences. By reporting the incident, you're not only helping yourself, but also helping the authorities tackle the problem. The square on the right is Plaça Reial, one of Barcelona's most beautiful and iconic squares. It was built in the 19th century on the site of a former monastery and quickly became one of the city's most elegant public spaces. If you look closely, you'll even find a set of lampposts designed by a young Antoni Gaudí long before he became world famous. Today, Plaça Reial is one of the liveliest spots in the old city. It's surrounded by restaurants, bars, and small venues with live music, making it a popular place to relax during the day and a busy meeting point after dark. If you're looking for nightlife in the historic center of Barcelona, chances are you'll end up here at some point. Over on the right is Plaça Sant Jaume. We'll be visiting it shortly, so I'll tell you more about its fascinating history when we get there. For many people from the city's working classes, the Liceu came to represent the enormous social inequalities that existed in Barcelona during the industrial era. Those tensions exploded dramatically in 1893 when an anarchist named Santiago Salvador threw 2 bombs into the audience during a performance. One of them exploded, killing around 20 people and injuring many others. The attack shocked the city and became one of the most infamous moments in Barcelona's history, reflecting the deep social conflicts of the period. The theater also survived 2 major fires, one in 1861 and another in 1994. The second fire destroyed much of the building and deeply affected Barcelona, but the decision was quickly made to rebuild it. The Liceu reopened in 1999, combining its historic appearance with modern technology and facilities. In recent decades, the theater has made a significant effort to move away from its image as an institution reserved for the elite. Educational programs, reduced price tickets, activities for young audiences, and community projects have all been introduced to make opera and culture more accessible to a wider part of society. Today, the Liceu remains one of the cultural landmarks of Barcelona, welcoming both international performers and local audiences, while continuing to play an important role in the city's cultural life. Nearby is the Joan Miró Mosaic, one of Barcelona's most recognizable pieces of public art. It was designed by Catalan artist Joan Miró and inaugurated in 1976 as part of a project intended to welcome visitors arriving in the city from the sea. The colorful circular design has become one of the symbols of La Rambla and reflects the playful and distinctive style for which Miró became internationally known. Visitors arriving by air may also recognize another of his works. The large ceramic mural on the exterior of Terminal 2 at Barcelona Airport was also created by Miró and has recently been granted legal protection as a cultural heritage element, ensuring its preservation for future generations. Up ahead, you can see La Boqueria, one of Barcelona's most famous and busiest markets. If you have some extra time, it's worth taking a look inside. You'll find local products, fresh food, and a lively atmosphere that offers a glimpse into Barcelona's culinary traditions. And if you are enjoying this walk, remember to subscribe to Patchy Travels. It does not cost you anything, and it really helps me a lot to keep creating useful videos about Barcelona, ports, airports, and travel tips. On the left is the Church of Our Lady of Bethlehem, a beautiful Baroque church dating back to the 17th century. Originally built by the Jesuits, it has survived fires, wars, and centuries of change in Barcelona. Despite being located on one of the city's busiest streets, it's often overlooked by visitors rushing along La Rambla. On the left is the Poliorama Theater. Barcelona has a strong theater culture, and many locals still enjoy spending an evening watching a play. Most performances are in Catalan, but if you're staying in the city for a few days and want to experience Barcelona beyond its famous landmarks, a night at the theater can be a surprisingly authentic way to do it. At the top of La Rambla stands the Canalets Fountain, one of Barcelona's most iconic landmarks. According to local tradition, anyone who drinks from this fountain is destined to return to the city one day. It's also the place where FC Barcelona fans gather to celebrate major victories and trophies. The tradition dates back to a time when football results were posted on a notice board outside the offices of a nearby sports newspaper, attracting supporters eager to learn how their team had performed. Just a little further ahead is Restaurant Núria. Finding a good place to eat around the most touristy parts of Barcelona can sometimes be a challenge, but this is one of the few restaurants in the area that I occasionally visit myself, making it a solid option if you're looking for a meal near Plaça Catalunya. Over here is the monument to Francesc Macià, one of the most important figures in modern Catalan history. Before entering politics, Macià was an officer in the Spanish army, but he later became a strong advocate for Catalan self-government. In 1931, following the fall of the Spanish monarchy, he proclaimed a Catalan republic and later became the first president of the restored Generalitat of Catalonia, a position he held until his death in 1933. The monument's unusual inverted staircase often catches visitors' attention. Designed by sculptor Josep Maria Subirachs, it symbolizes a nation that is constantly being built, with its future still unfinished. At the front, you'll see a bronze bust of Macià himself, a leader who is still remembered by many Catalans as l'Avi, or the grandfather, because of his popularity and the affection many people felt towards him. The large building in front of us is El Corte Inglés, Spain's best-known department store chain. If you're looking for a place to take a break, head up to the top floor, where you'll find a panoramic restaurant and cafe with impressive views over Plaça de Catalunya and much of central Barcelona. It's a great spot to enjoy a meal, a coffee, or simply take in the city from above before continuing your visit. If you'd like a closer look, I have a dedicated video about this restaurant on my channel. In fact, you'll find more videos covering many of the places we're passing during this walk, with extra tips and practical information for visitors. This part of Plaça de Catalunya is one of Barcelona's main transport hubs. From here, you can catch the city's hop-on, hop-off tourist buses, as well as the Aerobús, the express service that connects the city center directly with Barcelona Airport. For cruise passengers, this can be especially useful. If your cruise has ended and you need to get to the airport, many visitors choose to travel from the port to Plaça de Catalunya and then take the Aerobús from here. It's a simple, reliable, and affordable option with frequent departures and plenty of space for luggage. You'll also find one of Barcelona's main tourist information offices here in Plaça de Catalunya, a useful place to get maps, attraction tickets, and advice if you're visiting the city for the first time. More importantly, Plaça de Catalunya is one of Barcelona's main transport hubs. Beneath the square, you'll find metro and commuter train stations, making it easy to reach many parts of the city and the rest of Catalonia. If you're staying a few extra days, this is where many journeys to places like Girona, Sitges, Montserrat, or the airport begin. For many visitors, Plaça de Catalunya is the point where Barcelona's historic center meets the modern city, making it a useful landmark to keep in mind as you explore. If you look closely at this traffic light, you'll notice that it's a little different from most others in the city. Instead of the usual pedestrian figure, it features characters from Mortadelo y Filemón, one of Spain's most famous comic book series. Created by Barcelona-born cartoonist Francisco Ibáñez in 1958, the comic follows the often chaotic adventures of two secret agents and has entertained generations of readers. This playful tribute was installed to honor Ibáñez and his contribution to Spanish popular culture, adding a touch of humor to the streets of his hometown. Over on the left is the official Tour de France store. Cycling is deeply rooted in Catalan culture, and whether you're in the city, along the coast, or in the mountains, you're likely to come across cyclists enjoying some of Europe's most spectacular routes. That connection will be on full display as the Tour de France starts in Barcelona, with the first stages of the race taking place in Catalonia. For cycling fans, it's a rare opportunity to see one of the world's greatest sporting events pass through the region. Now we are passing through Passeig de Gràcia, one of the most elegant avenues in Barcelona. Years ago, this was the road that connected the old city with the former town of Gràcia, before this whole area became part of the Eixample. Today, it is one of the best places to see Barcelona's modernist architecture, with famous buildings such as Casa Batlló and La Pedrera, both by Antoni Gaudí. But even if you do not visit the buildings inside, it is worth simply walking here and looking up at the facades, balconies, and small details. This is also one of the most expensive areas in the city, with luxury shops and very central hotels. Staying here can be very convenient, especially if it is your first time in Barcelona, but personally, I would not always say it is the best value for money. You can often find better hotel options in nearby areas, still very well connected, and use the money you save for food, visits, or transport. And now we are crossing Gran Via, one of the main avenues of Barcelona and one of the great arteries of the Eixample. It is a very long street that runs across the city and helps connect many different neighborhoods. Around this area, Gran Via is not necessarily the most spectacular street for a first-time visitor, but it is full of shops, offices, hotels, theaters, and everyday Barcelona life. It also gives you a good idea of how the modern city was designed, with wide, straight avenues and large city blocks. If you follow Gran Via to the left, you eventually reach Plaça España with Montjuïc nearby. And if you follow it to the right, it takes you towards Plaça de la Gloria, an area that has changed a lot in recent years and shows a more modern side of Barcelona. On the left, we can see the Borsa de Barcelona stock exchange building. It is not the kind of place most visitors come to photograph, but it fits very well with this part of the city. Passeig de Gràcia has always been connected with business, wealth, and the more elegant side of Barcelona. If you enjoy architecture, this is a wonderful area to walk through slowly. Around here, every facade seems to have its own character. Some are elegant, others are more decorative, and many have details that are very easy to miss if you only look at the shops. This is Casa Leo Moreira, one of the great modernist buildings on Passeig de Gràcia. It was designed by Luis Domènech i Montaner, one of the key architects of Catalan modernism. This building is part of the famous Block of Discord, where several wealthy families built very different and very impressive houses next to each other. Each one tried to stand out, and that is why this small section of Passeig de Gràcia is so interesting. Casa Leo Moreira may not be as instantly recognizable as Gaudi's Casa Batlló, but if you look closely, the facade is full of elegant details. And later in this walk, we will visit another masterpiece by the same architect, the Palau de la Música Catalana. This is Casa Amatler, designed by Joseph Puig y Cadafalch for the Amatler family, who are known for their chocolate business. And here we have one of the great jewels of Barcelona, Casa Batlló. It was redesigned by Antoni Gaudí, and even from the street you can immediately see that this is not an ordinary building. The facade is full of curves, colors, and unusual shapes. The balconies almost look like masks, and the roof is often compared to the back of a dragon. For many visitors, this is one of those wow moments in Barcelona. You may not know much about architecture, but you can still feel that this building is something special. Of course, Casa Batlló can be visited inside, but even if you are just walking through the city, it is worth stopping here for a few seconds, looking up and enjoying one of Gaudí's most famous works. And if you still want to see Casa Batlló from a different angle, here is a small local tip. Very close to here, inside the Servei Estacio shop, you can go upstairs and access a small terrace. From there, you can see part of the rear side of Casa Batlló. It is not the famous postcard view from Passeig de Gràcia, but it is an interesting and much less obvious perspective of one of Gaudí's most iconic buildings. Just in front of the shop, we also have the Tapis Museum, dedicated to Antoni Tapis, one of the most important Catalan artists of the 20th century. The building is easy to recognize because of the large sculpture on the roof called Cloud and Chair. And if you are enjoying this walk through Barcelona, remember to subscribe to the channel. It does not cost you anything, and it really helps me continue creating more useful videos like this one, especially for people visiting Barcelona by cruise ship or for the first time. And here we have White Rabbit, one of Barcelona's newer immersive experiences. It is not a traditional museum, but more of an interactive visit inspired by Barcelona and Catalan culture. Inside, you can find digital art, visual installations, and spaces designed to be very photogenic, so it is clearly aimed at visitors looking for something different from the classic monuments and museums. I think it can be an interesting option if you have already seen the main sites, or if you want something indoors and a bit more modern during your stay in Barcelona. Even though Passeig de Gràcia has many trees and some shade, if the sun bothers you, there is a small alternative. You can do part of the same route using one of the parallel streets. They are often a bit quieter, with more shade in some sections, and you will still find shops, cafes, and interesting buildings along the way. And this building is La Pedrera, one of Gaudi's most famous works in Barcelona. Its official name is Casa Milà because it was built for the Milà family, but everyone knows it as La Pedrera, which means the stone quarry in Catalan. And when you look at the facade, you can understand why. It does not look like a normal building at all. It is full of waves, curves, and movement, almost as if the stone were alive. One of the most famous parts is the rooftop, with its unusual chimneys and shapes that look almost like sculptures. You can visit it inside, but even from the street, La Pedrera is one of those buildings that shows why Gaudí changed the way people understood architecture in Barcelona. If we continued straight up this avenue, we would eventually reach Gràcia, one of the most interesting neighborhoods in Barcelona. Gràcia has a very strong identity of its own. It used to be a separate town before becoming part of Barcelona, and even today it still keeps that local feeling, with small streets, lively squares, local shops, and a different rhythm from the city center. I have already talked about Gràcia in other videos, and I will probably make more in the future because it really deserves its own walk. But for today, since we started this route from the cruise port, going all the way up there and exploring it properly would make the walk too long. So today we will stay closer to the center, but keep Gràcia in mind if you have more time in Barcelona. It is definitely worth discovering. The same thing happens with the Sagrada Familia. Of course, it is absolutely worth seeing, and for many people it is one of the highlights of Barcelona. But for this particular walk, starting from the cruise port, it is a little too far away, and if you only have a few hours in the city, this is something important to think about. With the route I am showing you today, you can see many different sides of Barcelona in one walk. The old city, the Rambla, Passeig de Gràcia, modernist architecture, local streets, squares, and useful areas for visitors. If you decide to go all the way to the Sagrada Familia, it can definitely be worth it, but you will probably miss many other places that you would also have enjoyed discovering. And one small but important tip while walking around Barcelona: respect the traffic lights. Even if it looks like no cars are coming, a motorbike, a bicycle, or an electric scooter can appear very quickly. Barcelona is a very walkable city, but it is also a busy city, and the last thing you want during your visit is an accident that could easily have been avoided. And honestly, if you are on holiday, waiting a few seconds is not a big deal. Use that moment to look around, enjoy the buildings, take a photo, or simply take in the atmosphere before continuing the walk safely. Passeig de Gràcia is also one of Barcelona's great shopping streets, especially for luxury brands and flagship stores. Many big companies choose this avenue to launch new products, present special collections, or run promotions, because this is one of the most visible and prestigious locations in the city. So, depending on the day, you may see long queues outside some shops. Sometimes it is because of a new product launch, sometimes because of a special offer, and sometimes simply because the brand itself has become part of the attraction. It is another side of Passeig de Gràcia, not only architecture and history but also fashion, shopping, and the more commercial face of modern Barcelona. In Barcelona, if you need a taxi, you can often stop one directly on the street, especially if the green light is on. You do not always need to look for a taxi rank. That said, I personally almost never take regular taxis. When I need a car in Barcelona, I usually prefer using Uber or Cabify, mainly because I like seeing the price before I get in. For me, it is just more comfortable, especially if I'm going to the airport, the cruise port, or traveling with luggage. But taxis are still a very practical option here, and you will see them everywhere around the city. During this walk, some of you who are very observant may have noticed people asking for money in the street. And I think it is important to say this with respect. Not everyone you see in this situation is trying to scam you or steal from you. Some people are simply asking for help, and they should be treated with dignity. But at the same time, as a visitor, you should also be careful not to confuse that with situations where someone approaches you with an excuse to distract you. In busy areas of Barcelona, distraction is sometimes used as a trick. Someone may ask you something, show you something, or try to get your attention while another person gets too close to your bag or pockets. So the best advice is simple: be polite, but stay aware. Keep your belongings close, especially in crowded areas, and do not let anyone distract you from your phone, wallet, or bag. Barcelona is a wonderful city to walk around, but like in any major tourist destination, a little attention can save you a lot of trouble. Around this area, there are also several consulates from different countries. It is one of those things you probably do not think about when you are visiting Barcelona, but it can be useful to know. If you have a problem with your passport, need some official paperwork, or require assistance from your country during your stay, there is a good chance you may have to come to this part of the city. You will often see tourist buses around this area. For many visitors, they are a good option, especially if you have limited time and want to see several parts of Barcelona without walking too much. But personally, I think walking gives you a much better feeling of the city. When you walk, you notice the details, the facades, the shops, the small streets, the people, and the real atmosphere of Barcelona. So the tourist bus can be practical, but if you're able to walk, even just for part of your visit, I think you will connect much more with the city. Passeig de Gràcia is also very well connected by public transport. Along the avenue, you will find plenty of city buses, and around this area you also have metro and train connections. The Passeig de Gràcia station is especially useful because from here you can move around Barcelona but also connect with other places outside the city. So even if hotels here are not always the best value for money, the location is excellent. You can walk to many important places and when you need it, use bus, metro, or train very easily. Now we are heading towards Plaça Urquinaona, a square located very close to Plaça Catalunya. It is not as famous, and most visitors simply pass through it, but it is actually an important connection point in the center of Barcelona. From here, you have several main streets starting or passing nearby, including Via Laietana, Ronda de Sant Pere, and the area leading towards the Old City. So it works a bit like a small gateway between the Example and the historic center. One interesting detail is that Plaça Urquinaona is named after José María de Urquinaona, who was Bishop of Barcelona in the 19th century. But for most people today, this square is more practical than monumental. Metro, buses, offices, shops, and a lot of daily city movement. Now we are going to continue our walk down Via Laietana, one of the main streets connecting the Example with the Old City and the port area. Although it may look like a classic central avenue, Via Laietana is actually quite modern compared with the medieval streets around it. It was opened in the early 20th century to create a direct connection between the newer part of Barcelona and the waterfront. Its construction changed this part of the Old City a lot, because many old streets and buildings disappeared to make space for this avenue. And interestingly, during those works, tunnels were already prepared for what would later become part of Barcelona's metro system. Just a few steps from Via Laietana, we have one of the most beautiful hidden treasures of Barcelona, the Palau de la Música Catalana. It was designed by Luis Domènech Montaner, the same architect we mentioned earlier when we saw Casa Batlló Moreres on Passeig de Gràcia. And this is one of the best examples of Catalan modernism in the city. The building is a concert hall, but even if you do not go inside, it is worth coming here just to see the facade. It is full of color, columns, sculptures, glass, and ceramic details. It is one of those places where you can spend a few minutes just looking at the building and still keep discovering new details. There is also a cafe inside called Café Palau, and it is open to the public. So you do not need a concert ticket to stop here for a coffee, a drink, or a short break during your walk through Barcelona. And of course, the Palau de la Música is still a working concert hall. You can find classical music, choral concerts, piano recitals, orchestras, flamenco shows, and other cultural performances. So if you enjoy music, it is worth checking the program because attending a concert here is not just about the music. It is also a chance to experience one of the most beautiful interiors in Barcelona. And just in front of the Palau de la Música, we can also see this sculpture by Jaume, one of the most internationally known Catalan artists. The work is called Carmela, and it represents the head of a young woman, but with this elongated and almost dreamlike shape that is very typical of Plensa's work. And here we have a shop specialized in kegeners, one of the most traditional and curious figures in Catalan nativity scenes. The kegener is usually placed in a hidden corner of the nativity scene, and although it may seem a bit surprising if you see it for the first time, it is a very typical Catalan tradition. So, if you want to take home a souvenir that is genuinely connected with Catalan culture, this could be one of the most original options. This building in front of us is the police headquarters on Via Laietana. For many people in Barcelona, this is not just another official building. It is a very sensitive place, strongly linked to repression, especially during the Franco dictatorship and the years of the democratic transition. Over the years, many people have denounced ill treatment and torture inside this building, including Catalan activists and people who defended Catalan language, culture, and political rights. Because of this history, there have been many calls to transform this police station into a place of memory. In fact, the building has been officially recognized as a site of democratic memory because of its role in political repression and human rights violations. So, as we walk down Via Laietana, this is one of those places that reminds us that Barcelona is not only beautiful streets and monuments, it also has a difficult history that many people here still remember very deeply. Here on the left, we have Santa Caterina Market, one of my favorite markets in Barcelona. It is less famous than La Boqueria, but I really like it because it feels a bit more local. Inside, you can find quality food stalls, fresh products, and also some bars and restaurants where you can stop for something to eat. And the building itself is worth a look, especially because of its colorful, wavy roof, which stands out in this historic part of the city. And here in front of us, we find Plaça de la Catedral, one of the most important squares in the old city of Barcelona. This is where you really start to feel the Gothic Quarter. Narrow streets, historic buildings, street musicians, people taking photos, and of course the Cathedral of Barcelona. The cathedral is dedicated to Saint Eulalia, one of the patron saints of the city, and although the facade looks very impressive, part of what we see today was actually completed much later than the medieval structure behind it. It is worth coming here even if you do not go inside. The square is one of those places where Barcelona feels both monumental and alive at the same time. Depending on the day, you may find markets, traditional events, or just people sitting and enjoying the atmosphere. And for this walk from the port, this is one of the best stops to understand the historic heart of Barcelona. In front of us, we can see a small section of Barcelona's ancient Roman aqueduct. It is a reconstruction, but it reminds us how water was brought into the Roman city of Barcino almost 2,000 years ago. On the right, we can see the headquarters of the Architects Association of Catalonia. And on its facade, there is a very special detail, the large drawings based on original designs by Picasso. Now we are entering the older part of Barcelona, heading towards Carrer del Bisbe, one of the most photographed streets in the Gothic Quarter. This is the kind of area where the city changes completely. We leave behind the wider avenues and enter narrower streets, stone facades, small squares, and buildings that make you feel much closer to medieval Barcelona. Now we are going deeper into the Gothic Quarter towards Plaça Sant Felip Neri. Normally, this is one of the quietest and most intimate squares in the Old City, even if today we are finding a children's popular celebration here. But this square is also one of the most emotional places in Barcelona. During the Civil War, it was bombed by the Italian Fascist Air Force, which was fighting on the side of Franco's army. At that time, there was a school here, and many children died in the attack. If you look at the walls of the church, you can still see the marks left by the bombing. For many Catalans, this is not just a beautiful hidden square, it is also a place of memory and a reminder of one of the darkest moments in the city's history. Those of you who follow my channel may already be familiar with this comment, but there is something about tourism in Barcelona that still surprises me. Many tour guides working in the city are not actually from Barcelona, and in many cases they are not Catalan either. Some have only lived in Catalonia for a short time, but they are the ones explaining the city, its culture, and its traditions to visitors. Of course, this does not mean that someone from outside cannot be a good guide. There are excellent professionals who study, respect the place, and do a very good job. But personally, I think that to explain Barcelona properly, you need more than just memorizing a script. You need to understand the local context, the language, the history, the small details, and also the emotions that certain places have for people who live here. Barcelona is not only a collection of monuments, it is a city with its own identity, and I think that identity deserves to be explained with care and respect. Here in front of us, we will find the famous Pont del Bisbe, or Bishop's Bridge, one of the most photographed corners of the Gothic Quarter. At first sight, many people think it is medieval because it fits perfectly with the atmosphere of these narrow streets. But actually, it is much more recent. It was built in the 1920s, when this part of the city was being restored and given a more Gothic appearance. Even so, it has become one of the most iconic images of old Barcelona. And this is something that happens quite often in the Gothic Quarter. Not everything that looks medieval is actually medieval, but the atmosphere is still very special. Here on the right, we have the Palau de la Generalitat, one of the most important political buildings in Catalonia. It is the seat of the Catalan government, and it has been at the center of Catalan institutional life for centuries. The building combines different architectural styles because it has been expanded and modified over time. From the outside, it may look quite discreet compared with the other monuments, but politically and historically, it is one of the most significant buildings in Barcelona. That is what makes Plaça Sant Jaume such an important place. On one side, you have the Palau de la Generalitat, the seat of the Catalan government, and just in front of it, Barcelona City Hall. So, in the same square, you find two of the most important institutions in the country, the government of Catalonia and the government of the city of Barcelona. Now we are heading back towards Via Laietana, and from there we will enter one of the most historic areas of Barcelona. This is one of the things I really like about walking through the old city. In just a few streets, the atmosphere can change completely. You move from wider avenues and official buildings into narrow streets, hidden corners, and places where you can still feel the Roman and medieval past of Barcelona. As you can see in many souvenir shops in Barcelona, what they sell often has very little to do with Barcelona or Catalonia. Sometimes, honestly, it feels like the shop could be in Andalusia, Mexico, or almost anywhere else. And I think that is a bit of a shame because Catalonia has more than enough interesting traditions, products, and symbols of its own. So if you want to take home a real souvenir from your visit, I would personally try to choose something that is actually connected with the place you are visiting. It does not have to be expensive. It can be something simple, but at least something that reminds you of Barcelona, Catalonia, and the culture you have discovered here, not just a generic tourist object that you could find in many other cities. And if you have any questions about this walk, about Barcelona, or about planning your visit, leave them in the comments. I always try to read them, and your questions also help other people who are preparing their trip. And of course, if you have already visited Barcelona and want to share your own experience, your favorite place, or any useful tip, I would love to read it too. Also, if you are enjoying this video, remember to subscribe to Patchy Travels. It does not cost you anything, and it helps me a lot to keep creating useful videos about Barcelona, cruise ports, airports, and travel tips. Now we are heading towards the area around Santa Maria del Mar, one of the most historic and atmospheric parts of Barcelona. Here, the city changes again. We start to find narrow streets, small squares, and corners that feel much more intimate than the wide avenues we saw before. And this is not by chance. In this part of the old city, the streets are narrow and the buildings are close together, which helps create shade and keeps the area cooler, especially during the hottest days of summer. It is also one of those places where it is worth walking slowly. Sometimes the most interesting part is not a single monument, but the atmosphere of the streets themselves. This area is full of restaurants, and personally, I think it is usually a better place to eat than many of the more touristy streets we have passed earlier in the walk. Of course, you still have to choose carefully because we are in a very visited part of Barcelona. But around here, you can find some nice places with a better atmosphere and often a more interesting food offer. So if you are doing this walk and you want to stop for lunch or dinner, this area around Santa Maria del Mar can be a very good option. And now we are arriving at Santa Maria del Mar, one of the most important and beloved churches in Barcelona. For many Barcelonians, this church has a very special meaning. It is often seen as the Church of the People because it was closely linked to the neighborhood, to the merchants, sailors, and workers who lived and worked around this part of the city. Architecturally, it is one of the best examples of Catalan Gothic. From the outside, it may look quite sober, but inside it feels surprisingly spacious, elegant, and full of light. Santa Maria del Mar has also become very well known thanks to the novel Cathedral of the Sea and the small TV series based on it. So, if after this walk you want to understand a little more about this part of medieval Barcelona in a more entertaining way, that series can be an interesting option. But even without knowing the history, this is one of those places where you can feel that you are in a very important part of the old city. If you look closely at some of the stones around churches and old buildings in Barcelona, you may notice long marks carved into the walls. One traditional explanation is that, in the past, some of these marks were made by butchers or craftsmen sharpening their knives and tools against the stone. Today, you can still see marks like these in different historic corners of the city. Whether every single mark has the same origin or not, they are a small reminder that these buildings were not always just monuments. They were a part of everyday life, surrounded by markets, trades, workers, and the daily rhythm of the old city. In this street in front of us, you can find several museums, including the Picasso Museum, one of the most popular museums in Barcelona. So, if you have enough time during your visit, this can be a very good area to explore more slowly. And it is not only about museums. Around here, you can also find some good restaurants and places to stop for tapas, especially if you want to take a break before continuing through the old city. Here in front of us, we have Passeig del Born, one of the most lively and atmospheric streets in this part of Barcelona. If we went to the left, we would reach the Born Cultural Center, where you can see archaeological remains of medieval and early modern Barcelona. It is a very interesting place if you have time and want to understand this area a little better. Passeig del Born is also full of bars and restaurants, so it can be a good area to stop for a drink, some tapas, lunch, or dinner. During the weekend, and especially in summer, it is usually quite lively, with many young people meeting here in the evening. You may also find small markets, cultural activities, or local events around this area. So it is not only a historic street, but also a place where the neighborhood still feels very alive. Now we are at the Fossar de la Morera, one of the most symbolic places in Barcelona for many Catalans. This was the old cemetery next to Santa Maria del Mar. During the War of the Spanish Succession, many of the people who died defending Barcelona in 1714 were buried here. Today it is still a place of memory. It honors those who gave their lives defending the city and the freedoms of Catalonia. On the wall, you can read one of the most famous verses connected with this place. At the Fossar de la Morera, no traitor is buried. Even if we lose our flags, it will remain the urn of honor. So, although this may look like a quiet and simple square, for many Catalans it has a very deep historical and emotional meaning. Here in front of us, we are leaving behind the narrow streets of the old city and entering a much more open area with wider spaces and large buildings. But this part of Barcelona did not always look like this. Before 1714, this was also a dense neighborhood full of narrow streets, houses, and everyday life. After the arrival of the Castilian troops in 1714, a large part of this neighborhood was demolished as a punishment, and a huge military fortress was built here to control the city, the Ciutadella. For many Catalans, this place is a reminder of one of the most painful chapters in Barcelona's history. What today is an open area with the Parc de la Ciutadella and important public buildings was once a neighborhood that was destroyed after the defeat of Barcelona. Here we find one of Barcelona's most classic restaurants, Seven Portis. This is one of those historic places that many locals know, especially for traditional Catalan cuisine and rice dishes. It is not the cheapest option in the city, of course, but if you have the budget and you want to try a restaurant with history, good service, and a very Barcelona atmosphere, Seven Ports is usually a safe choice. Now we are heading back towards the sea, getting closer again to the port area. Around here, we begin to see buildings and spaces connected with Barcelona's maritime history, trade, and port activity. The city has always had a very strong relationship with the sea, and the port has played a key role in its growth. In the building in front of us, we find the Museum of the History of Catalonia. If you are interested in understanding where Catalans come from and learning more about our long and often complicated history, this is one of the best places to visit in Barcelona. The museum explains the history of Catalonia from its origins to the present day, with exhibitions about society, politics, culture, everyday life, and the moments that have shaped the country. So, if during your stay you want to go beyond the usual monuments and understand a little better the identity of Catalonia, this museum is a very good option. Now we are arriving back at the port area. Around here you can often see some yachts, and the atmosphere starts to feel much more connected with the sea again. In front of the port, there is also usually a small market with souvenirs and handmade products from local artisans. So if you still want to take something home from Barcelona, this can be a nice place to have a look before finishing the walk. Here, if we continue to the left, we would reach Mare Magnum, a shopping and restaurant area right by the water. You can also find the Barcelona Aquarium there, so it can be a good option if you are traveling with children or if you want something easy and very close to the port. I have already shown this area in other videos on Patsy Travels, so today we will leave it to one side and continue towards the World Trade Center. This area along the port is also a very pleasant place for a walk. After the narrow streets of the old city, everything opens up again, with more space, the sea nearby, and a more relaxed atmosphere. You will often see people running, cycling, skating, or just walking by the waterfront. It is one of those areas where Barcelona feels a bit more open and active, and depending on the time of year, this space can change quite a lot. Sometimes there are temporary stages for concerts, small fairs, markets, or different events by the port. In front of us, you can see one of the towers of the port cable car, one of the most recognizable structures on Barcelona's waterfront. This cable car connects the port area with Montjuïc, crossing above the harbor and offering some of the best views of Barcelona, the sea, the cruise port, and the city skyline. It is not the fastest way to move around the city, and it is more of an experience than practical transport, but if you have time and you want a different view of Barcelona, it can be a very interesting option. This is the Pelebot Santa Eulalia, one of the historic ships of the Maritime Museum of Barcelona. It is a traditional sailing vessel from the beginning of the 20th century, and today it is preserved as part of the city's maritime heritage. When you see it here in the port, it is a nice reminder that Barcelona was shaped not only by its streets and buildings, but also by the sea, trade, and navigation. The ship can also be visited depending on the day and the museum's program. You can go on board and get an idea of what this type of traditional sailing ship was like from the inside. Now we are on the maritime side of Plaça de Colom, very close to the port. And here is a useful reference if you are visiting Barcelona by cruise ship. The Columbus statue points towards the cruise area, so if at some moment you feel a bit disoriented, look for Columbus. It is not a map, of course, but it helps you understand where the sea and the port are. From here, you are already quite close to the cruise shuttle area and the World Trade Center. In this area, you can also take the harbor boat services. On one side, you have the small sea bus, which connects different parts of the port and can be useful if you want to move around the waterfront without walking too much. And from here, you can also take the famous golondrinas, the classic sightseeing boats of Barcelona. They offer short trips around the harbor and, depending on the route, along the coastline. It is not something you need to do if you only have a few hours in Barcelona, but if you want to see the city from the water or you are traveling with children, it can be a very pleasant and easy activity right next to the port. This area in front of us on the left is the old Mall Nord, the North Pier. In the past, cruise ships used to dock here, much closer to the city center. Today, this part is no longer used for cruise ships and has become an open public area by the port, where you can walk and enjoy the waterfront. Nowadays, in this immediate area, cruise calls are basically limited to Mall S, the South Pier, where you may still occasionally see a cruise ship docked. Most large cruise ships now use the terminals further away at Maladosat. This World Trade Center area is also important for ferry passengers. Around here you can find some ferry terminals and also offices where you may be able to buy tickets or get information from ferry companies. And now we are back at the place where we started this walk, next to the World Trade Center, where the cruise port shuttle stops. From here, many cruise passengers begin or finish their visit to Barcelona, and I think this route is a very good option if you want to see a lot of the city on foot without going too far from the port. I hope you enjoyed this walk through Barcelona, from the port to the Old City, Passeig de Gràcia, the Gothic Quarter, Santa Maria del Mar, the Bourne area, and back again to the waterfront. If you have any questions about Barcelona, the cruise port, transport, or anything we have seen during the walk, leave them in the comments. And if you have already visited Barcelona, I would also love to read your experience and your own tips. You can also contact me if you need more information, and of course, remember to subscribe to Patchy Travels. It does not cost you anything, and it helps me a lot to keep creating useful videos about Barcelona, cruise ports, airports, and travel tips. Thank you very much for walking with me, and I will see you in the next video.